previous shutdowns have been, you want 10, I want 0, let's compromise at 5. It's a numbers game. This isn't a numbers game. They want a policy. They're saying extend our healthcare subsidies because we know we can't win a vote.
Yeah. And look, what they're also saying, I don't know if they can't win a vote on that. Look, it's $1.5 trillion in more spending that they're looking for. And it's not just about Obamacare subsidies. I mean, the biggest nut in all of that, quite honestly, is spending welfare benefits for illegals. That's the insanity of the Democratic Party. And when Republicans were making that point early on, the media and the Democrats changed the message. They said, no, this is about Obamacare subsidies, when it's not. And look, you've even had Democrats like Josh Gottheimer. Jared Golden has already voted with the Republicans on keeping the government open. You've got John Fetterman are saying what the Democrats are doing here is wrong. So they're seeing some breaks in the ranks. There's been 3 Democratic senators that actually have voted to keep the government open. I also think, knowing how craven the Democrats are, they think this is helping them in the Virginia governor's race. And they know they have problems because you've got all those Northern Virginia voters that rely on the government to make a living and whatnot. So I think short term, I think we're going to have something done between now and between Thanksgiving. But the Democrats weren't going to cave. They weren't going to compromise until after the elections that we're having tomorrow.
All right, guys, it is another week. It's an election week. That's a big deal. I hope you had a happy Halloween and enjoyed your extra hour of sleep. You're welcome. A big debate always still ensues about whether or not we should go on daylight saving time or stick to standard time. I know it's like the president addressed this already once. I'm a big fan of the extra light at night. I know some people talk about the circadian rhythm and getting out light in the morning, and I get that part. But I like light at night. I like those long summer nights where it's like light till 8:30 out at night. So just telling you where I am. Today is day 34 of the government shutdown, by the way. Tomorrow we'll tie the record, and then we'll see. But I don't see any. I'll get into this with Jim McLaughlin, the president's pollster. He's with us here to break it all down. I don't see any end in sight. I mean, I still think Thanksgiving might be the backstop here. We'll see. Tomorrow is election day. A lot of big elections going on. California, Prop 50. New Jersey got a governor's race. Virginia's got all 3 constitutional offices up. And New York has that big mayor's race. We'll break it all down with Jim in just a second. On this Wednesday, though, after election day, we'll talk about this later. The Supreme Court's going to hear this case on the president's tariffs and whether he had the right to use the emergency powers. We'll see from there. The president's suggesting over the weekend we could end this the shutdown if we use the, quote, nuclear option, meaning that instead of 60 votes, the Senate just changed the rule to 50 votes. I ran a poll on Twitter. I get it's not scientific. Jim McLaughlin probably doesn't care about it. But I said, end it, go with 50 votes, get it done, or keep it so that the minority has 60 votes. And you guys wouldn't believe this. 65% said keep it. Interesting. Again, not scientific. But anyway, before I bring in Jim, the president was on 60 Minutes last night. Now, look, here's the weird thing about this. I get they've got new ownership, but he just sued and won Paramount for like $16 million. He goes on CBS's 60 Minutes for an hour and 13 minutes, and they condensed it down to 27. Just saying, you can't trust these guys. But there was one interesting clip on this thing about the government shutdown I want to play for you. Take a look.
You have helped end these government shutdowns in the past when they came about, and you did it by bringing them.
I'm very good at it, but I'm not going to do it by. I'm not going to do it by extortion. I'm not going to do it by being extorted by the Democrats who have lost their way. There's something wrong with these people.
So then what happens on November 15th when the troops don't get a paycheck?
Schumer is a basket case, and he has nothing to lose. He's become, I just left Japan, he's become a kamikaze pilot.
Sounds like it's not going to get solved, the shutdown.
It's going to get solved, yeah. Oh, it's going to get solved.
How?
We'll get it solved. Eventually, they're going to have to vote.
You're saying the Democrats will capitulate?
I think they have to. And if they don't vote, that's their problem. Now, I happen to agree with something else. I think we should do the nuclear option.
Right. I mean, that's, again, to my point, at some point, you guys think the Dems won't do this when they take control of the Senate at some point? Why do we always think that somehow we need to be better? Get this thing done. Anyway, Jim McLaughlin, as I said, is about to join us tomorrow. Chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Jim Jordan. On Wednesday, Curtis Houck from the Media Research Center talks to us a little bit about the election fallout, plus Corinne Jean-Pierre's Book Tour Disaster. Big panel on Thursday, and then Victor Davis Hanson on Friday. By the way, tomorrow night we are going live at 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock, we will be live Eastern going over election results. I want to quick shout out on our rant. We had a great rant this weekend. Always feel free to hit that subscription and notification button. A big shout out. We got, I think it's Gixxer Squid 1. Sean is the most reasonable, logical, objective, and normal journalist, although I don't identify as a journalist. I'd identify as a moderate in today's crazy world. I'm thankful for Sean. Keep up the good work. Thank you guys for that. When you give us those comments on the various platforms, we'll take a look at them and we might give you a shout out. So go to whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple, give us a 5-star review and it's super helpful to show. And you might get a big shout out. Before I bring in Jim McLaughlin, you guys know we're like 50 something days out from Christmas. It is officially November. This is the time to splurge. And one of the things that I did this summer, and I've already started to buy, I'm not telling you who, because I don't want to give away the thing, but I will tell you, if you're on the lucky list, one of the things that I've started to get people are Boll and Branch sheets. It elevates. This is when you guys know what I'm talking about. The weather's getting cooler. You want to get into that, get into bed and feel comfortable and cozy. This bedding is unbelievably comfortable and the quality is next level. It's like it's staying in the fanciest hotel you've ever stayed in your own bed. And right now you can get 25% off site wide. It's their biggest sale ever. Their signature sheets are made from 100% pure organic cotton. They're soft, they're breathable, and every time you wash them, it gets softer. I'm telling you, I sleep better. I love these things. They've got throws and pillows and all sorts of stuff, duvets, you name it. Your bed looks really nice. Like you literally look like you're in that really nice hotel. Plus, they've got a 30-day night guarantee. Once you buy a Boll & Branch sheet, you're never going back. So do it while you get the 25% off. Give it for yourself. Give it to a loved one. You're going to want to make this everybody's favorite holiday season. 25% off plus free shipping and extended returns. But here's the kicker. You have to use this URL code. Go to Boll, BOLLAND, branch.com/Spicer and use code Spicer. You got to go to bollandbranch.com/Spicer and use code Spicer for 25% off. Trust me, use that though. No other way, because you won't get the full deal that I'm talking about. bollandbranch.com/Spicer, code word Spicer for 25% off. Guys, one of the great guys that I love talking about all the time is my buddy Leo Grillo. He founded Delta Rescue. It's amazing what he has done. He has now turned it into the world's largest no-kill sanctuary. The thing about it is they take care of all sorts of animals, dogs, cats, horses, you name it, that have been abused, neglected, abandoned. Leo takes care of everything, but he does it without any big government grants or Politico Pro subscription, USAID funding. It's all because of donations. I made a personal donation because I was so moved by the work of Leo Grillo at Delta Rescue. I'm asking you, please consider to do the same. Go to deltarescue.org, make a contribution, help the work of Delta Rescue. If you can, please click on that estate planning kit at the top. If you have an old 401k, a stock that you could transfer to make this an enduring mission, Leo would appreciate it. Go check out the videos, make a donation at deltarescue.org. Without further ado, one of the president's pollsters, Mr. Jim McLaughlin. Jim, welcome back to the show. Always good to see you, especially 24 hours out from an election.
Oh, yeah. No, thank goodness. Don't you remember these days, Sean? I'm
a lot calmer.
You know what? I always get sick around this time of the year, and I got it early this year. So now I'm feeling good. So we're all good.
Did you vote? Have you voted already? Are you an election day guy?
Yep. I voted early in person in New Jersey. So I like to get it in there. The other thing is I'm going to be on a plane tomorrow. So okay. I like to show up and do it early in person.
Well, I'm going to start with the shutdown, so maybe you won't be on a plane. We'll talk about this in a second.
I was wondering about that too.
Yeah, I just want to give the audience a little heads up. I want to start with talking about the shutdown, how that's playing, and then I want to move geographically through the different states and issues tomorrow. So we'll start on the West Coast, we'll move to the East Coast, and then if we have time, we'll go to the midterms. But let's start with the shutdown. Both sides seem to think they're winning. The Washington Post reported last week, or Politico, one of the two, the Democrats literally had a polling presentation that said, you're winning. Both sides, though, interestingly, seem to think they're winning. I don't actually doubt that. That's the interesting thing. I think that Dem base loves the fact that they're standing up to Trump. The Republican base thinks that this is just common sense. What are you seeing in the numbers, though, that might give one side or another some hope?
Look, I think there's a lot of truth to that, where the voters are really divided on this. But I think, look, we all know why this is going on in reality. It's like President Trump said last night in the 60 Minutes interview, it's a numbers game. This is Chuck Schumer's shutdown. This is the Democrats' shutdown. This is a historic shutdown from the standpoint of they basically said, we're going to keep the spending as it is. We're doing Biden's spending levels. The Democrats voted for this back in the spring. And now all of a sudden, they've decided we're not going to vote against it. Why? Because they see what's going on in New York City with Mamdani, and they don't want to become the next Joe Crowley, who loses, and that's who lost to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. They realize they're scared to death of their base. You've got somebody like, Hakeem Jeffries, who's out there, and now all of a sudden he's gone and endorsed Zohran Mamdani. Why? Because he's afraid he's going to get a primary. Now, Chuck Schumer hasn't endorsed one way or the other, and you saw Barack Obama's trying to have it both ways when it comes to this. So this is the Democrat shutdown. And what the Democrats are asking for is, quite frankly, it's insane. And the national media, as you all know, is trying to cover up for them on their shutdown.
But here's the question. To me, this is logically very simple, right? The Republicans say, you guys want to have a conversation. We'll have the conversation after you start throwing a temper tantrum, right? Open the government back up and then we'll have it. In fact, Thune has said, we'll give you your vote too. And so to me, that's a logical answer to this. Okay. I mean, frankly, I actually think Republicans are giving them too much, which is they're letting the terrorists get their way. We'll give you what you want. You just let the government open and then we can do this. I still, though, don't see the path forward because, as I said, Democrat polling tells them don't agree to this. And for that reason, I don't see a way forward. Someone's got to blink. And I can't imagine Republicans blinking and saying, we're going to give you a vote because they don't see. Here's the thing, Jim, this is where it's different. Previous shutdowns have been, you want 10, I want 0. Let's compromise at 5. It's a numbers game. This isn't a numbers game. They want a policy. They're saying extend our healthcare subsidies because we know we can't win a vote.
Yeah. And look, what they're also saying, I don't know if they can't win a vote on that. Look, it's $1.5 trillion in more spending that they're looking for. And it's not just about Obamacare subsidies. I mean, the biggest nut in all of that, quite honestly, is spending welfare benefits for illegals. That's the insanity of the Democratic Party. And when Republicans were making that point early on, the media and the Democrats changed the message. They said, no, this is about Obamacare subsidies, when it's not. And look, you've even had Democrats like Josh Gottheimer. Jared Golden has already voted with the Republicans on keeping the government open. You've got John Fetterman saying what the Democrats are doing here is wrong. So they're seeing some breaks in the ranks. There's been 3 Democratic senators that actually have voted to keep the government open. I also think, knowing how craven the Democrats are, they think this is helping them in the Virginia governor's race. And they know they have problems because you've got all those Northern Virginia voters that rely on the government to make a living and whatnot. So I think short term, I think we're going to have something done between now and between Thanksgiving. But the Democrats weren't going to cave. They weren't going to compromise until after the elections that we're having tomorrow.
So we have the elections tomorrow. I got to think that there's a few scenarios to play out. One, something tragic happens. And I say that hoping that's not the outcome, meaning there's a disaster in the air or something like that. And they go, guys, cut it out. Open the government back up and then we'll deal with it. 2, and that could be something like people really starting to have serious food issues, right? As well, because we know the SNAP benefits. But I also think that, like, superficially, these guys are all looking at themselves saying, I want to go have Thanksgiving with my family. I cannot sit there in good faith knowing politically that I'm going to have this big, nice meal with my family and millions of Americans will be without food benefits. I think that's it. Or is there another forcing mechanism that you see that will get people to the table?
No, I think you're right about that, Sean. And I think, look, the holiday travel will be a disaster. And then you're going to have a bunch of these politicians. And think about it. The Democrats are still running around. They're still fundraising. They're still doing their thing. And you have real suffering in America. And that's been the other interesting part about this. Donald Trump and the White House has been doing everything in their power to keep paying our troops, to keep the food assistance programs going. And they've shown a lot of compassion that they understand this here. And now for the Democrats, and again, the Democrats, look, you're getting some honest Democrats here who are actually voting with the Republicans to keep the government open. That's where the real bipartisanship has been so far on this issue. But the other big problem, again, it's their radical left-wing base that says, oh, this is great. We want to keep giving welfare to illegals. And that's the conundrum that the Democrats are having here. So I don't think they're gaining any ground on this issue. And I think at the end of the day, look, these ads are going to write themselves next time, because they're going to say that we're going to be able to say the Democrats are the ones that actually shut down the government. The Democrats are the ones that took away your food assistance.
Yeah. All right, let's start getting into these races. I want to start on the West Coast and move east. I don't know how much we're going to be able to talk. I mean, so Prop 50 is the big issue in the California ballot. That deals with redistricting, whether or not California can go for the next 3 cycles, despite the fact that they already voted for a constitutional first state commission. Okay. I don't see any data that suggests that Republicans have a shot there.
It looks to me, from everything I've seen, and I'm not involved directly with it, it looks like, the yes is in the mid 50s on that. And you only need a simple majority in order to pass. I think what's happened with that amendment, it's basically become partisan, and everybody's put their Democrat and their Republican jersey on. And the problem the Republicans have with that initiative out in California is there are more Democrats than Republicans. But you just mentioned the important point. There's all this money being spent on this thing. I think it's well over $100 million when it's all said and done. And there's a lot of people that are saying it's unconstitutional in the state California Constitution to do mid-district redistricting. We dealt with this in New York during the last cycle. So it's going to be, all this money may be spent. The Democrats may win the ballot initiative, but then it could be found out that this is actually unconstitutional. So I don't think, what happens tomorrow is going to be the end of what we're seeing on redistricting in California.
That's fascinating. I mean, it is interesting. But let me ask you this, just from a lessons learned standpoint. When we started this discussion about Prop 50, the streak for Republicans on ballot initiatives in California was pretty good. They had sort of bragged, hey, generally speaking, we do well on these things. Kevin McCarthy went out and talked about raising a boatload of cash. They obviously failed miserably at this effort. What is the lesson learned that we need to take out of what happened in California in terms of did they just come out too cocky? Did they frame this wrong? Did they overpromise and underdeliver? What is it that, if you looked at how that effort went down, what went wrong?
Look, it's a numbers game. And there's just a lot more Democrats than there are Republicans in California. And they're a state, they've been really, they've been inundated in terms of, immigration and whatnot. And then you've had a lot of the native Californians have actually left. They've gone to places like Texas and places like Arizona and whatnot. So you're getting few and few Republicans there. And as long as it becomes a partisan fight in a place like California, that's not a good fight for the Republicans to have, because it's become so Democratic.
All right. Let's move east. We're going to start south and move north. So we'll start here in Virginia, where I am. I want to put up on the screen for everyone the Real Clear the Real Clear Politics polling in the last several polls. If you go back to mid October, the 16th, you've got the Washington Post poll, Spanberger plus 12, Quantus Insights the 19th of October, Spanberger plus 5, Suffolk University, Spanberger plus 9, Christopher Newport University the 10th, October 21st, Spanberger plus 7, Roanoke College on the 22nd of October, Spanberger plus 10, Trafalgar Inside Advantage, Spanberger plus 4, and then Atlas on the 25th of October, Spanberger plus 9, Echelon Insights, October 28th, Spanberger plus 12. The Hill and Emerson on 1030 just a couple days ago. Spanberger plus 12. They have the Real Clear Politics average. Spanberger leading Winsome Sears, the Republican, by an average of 8.9.
Yeah.
Is there? I mean, that's all blue.
Yeah, and look, I think it's going to be closer than that. What was interesting was right after the J. Jones scandal broke, things seemed to be tightening, and we've seen obviously a major shift in the Attorney General's race, where it looks like Jason Miyares still has a legitimate shot of winning the Attorney General's race. We saw that tightening right afterwards, but you see this every day because you're down in the D.C., Virginia area. The mainstream media has basically tried to block out that scandal. Now, if you're watching the Sean Spicer show, if you're watching conservative news media, you see and you hear about it, but the mainstream media has basically tried to say nothing to see here. And one of the real ironies of the Virginia governor's race is, look, I'm old enough to remember last year when Barack Obama was castigating especially African American men, telling them, you have to vote for Kamala Harris because she's black. Now we saw Barack Obama down there yesterday, and he's telling people, no, don't vote for the black woman. You've got to vote for the white liberal elitist. I mean, it's pretty amazing what's going on. The fact that they have to bring Barack Obama down there shows you that they do have some turnout problems. They are having some problems with their base down there. It's going to be interesting to see how things play out. But I think the real key you want to look at is the lieutenant governor's race.
Okay, I want to get to that for a second. But by the way, just two interesting side notes. I don't know if this caught your eye up there in New Jersey, but it gets worse, my friend Jim.
Yeah.
The NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, endorsed the white woman, Abigail Spanberger, not the Winsome Sears, who would be the first woman of color in Virginia's history. The first, It just says something that you have an opportunity to put the first female woman of color in the Virginia governor's mansion, the seat of the Confederacy, and the NAACP says, no, we're going with the white woman.
All right. And Sean, I'm going to give you one up. I was on the other side when we lost to Doug Wilder with Marshall Coleman back in 1989. It was one of my first big governor races with my brother John back in those days. The New York Times, the Washington Post used to start off every single article on that race as the historic nature of Doug Wilder's candidacy, which, by the way, it was. And they used to say L. Douglas Wilder, grandson of slaves. But now that you have the historic nature of Winsome Sears' campaign, we don't hear about that. And especially from these liberal organizations like the NAACP.
It's crazy. All right. I just want to ask you one thing about the list of the poll organizations that I read off. Hill Emerson, Echelon Insights, Atlas Intel, Trafalgar Insider Advantage, Roanoke College, Christopher Newport, Suffolk, Qantas Insights, Washington Post, Shar. Is there anyone there of that list that you should, let's start with this, that you don't even pay attention to them? They have a history of horrible numbers.
Yeah, look, I get always nervous with any of the media outlets that are doing polls. We've seen it, even NBC yesterday, only 41% of their sample actually voted for Trump. Last I checked, Donald Trump got about half the vote in the country.
Right.
So they're undersampling the Trump voters. There was another one. I think the Washington Post, it's only about 35% of their sample actually voted for Trump. So I get anything that's related to a college, anything that's related to the media, I always get nervous about. And look, guys like Trafalgar, Atlas Intel, they've done a pretty good job. The folks, I know them a little bit over at Echelon Insights. And look, I think what's happened again, we saw that tightening of the race coming right after the J. Jones scandal, but I think they've kind of moved on from it. And I think the Democrats are getting a little bit of an advantage based off the shutdown in Virginia.
Okay. You mentioned the lieutenant governor's race. John Reed, the Republican, versus Ghazali Hashman, or I can't even pronounce. Anyway, Why do you think that's the race to look at?
I think in a lot of ways, it's the AG's race is going to be the more important one to look at. But I think, again, usually what happens in Virginia, it's usually all three. When we
Yeah.
worked for Jim Gilmore, when we worked for George Allen, it was the same thing. By the way, it was like that with Doug Wilder back in the day. And Doug Wilder was he was actually a good Democratic governor. He wasn't one of these insane Democrats like we get now. But I think the real race to look at there is the attorney general's race. Probably the lieutenant governor's race will be very similar to what happens in terms of the governor's race. And the interesting part about it, it's very different than New Jersey. New Jersey, the voters there overwhelmingly want change. In Virginia, they're actually, one of the things that the Republicans are dealing with is complacency, because for the most part, they like the direction that Youngkin and Donald Trump are kind of taking things. They like what's going on with the economy. Glenn Youngkin's a net positive statewide in terms of Virginia. So I think the real race to look at there is the attorney general's race, because you're seeing Miyares is either tied or he's actually ahead.
Well, let's put that up. I'll put that up for you right now. I mean, the funny thing is, if you go all the way back to June, it's all blue. J. Jones, J. Jones, J. Jones. And then at literally the first poll in October from Signal, it turns all red, right? It goes Trafalgar +6, VCU +3 for Miyares, Trafalgar +5 for Miyares, coefficient +4 for Miyares. It goes all Miyares except the last poll that just came out, that Hill Emerson. It's all red. Miyares. He turned the page with the J. Jones scandal. Hill Emerson comes out over the weekend, 10:30 to 10:31, 880 likely voters, margin of error 3.2, and it has Jones suddenly up 2.
Yeah, no, I think Jason Miyares is going to still win that race. And that survey, I think they had Winsome Earle-Sears down by 12 in the governor's race. I think it looks a little bit too Democratic to me, as best as I can tell. And I remember last cycle when they were doing some of the congressional races, like they said, Mike Lawler was in a dead heat. Mike Lawler won by 6 points. There was another one they had by us where they said the other Republican, Allison Esposito versus Ryan in New York, they said that was a dead heat. Allison Esposito lost by double digits. So again, and you know what? I say this as a pollster now. I tell people, don't pay attention to the polls. Just go out and vote. Because I truly mean this. Sean, you and I lived this in 2016 when we were crazy enough to say Donald Trump could win back in 2016, because I had surveys in places like North Carolina where President Trump was up by 1. He was up by 1 in Wisconsin. We were tied in Pennsylvania, literally tied. When I say we were tied, it was 46.4 to 46.4. So it's one of those things where forget the polls, make sure you have a good closing message here at the end, and then you get your people out to vote.
So I think Virginia's going to go like this. It's actually bottom to top, in my opinion. Miyares pulls it out, I think, by 3 to 4. I think the lieutenant governor's race there is literally the generic ballot, in my view, which is that no one knows either candidate, neither one has spent a ton of money. And then I think Winsome's got a shot, but it's like I have a hard they're just not. They've been swamped in the money. I hope to God she wins. This is a big deal for those of us in Virginia, because they take that, they'll have the House of Delegates, the state Senate. But I actually think that there's a mold where the bottom 2 win and she doesn't pull it off.
Yeah. And look, that is possible. That's what makes this interesting. It's like I said, usually it's a trifecta, either Democrat or Republican down in Virginia. And you know what the other interesting thing is too, is look, right now, these races that we're looking at, a place like New York, a place like New Jersey, when the Republicans not only have the presidency, but they control Congress, the Republicans shouldn't be in the game. And the Republicans are more than in the game here. And that's another interesting point, because usually what happens, the party that's out of power, that's who wins Virginia. That's who wins New Jersey.
It's interesting. I wonder, the thing that blows my mind is that we've got a Republican incumbent governor of Virginia, in Glenn Youngkin. We've got the presidency, we've got the House and the Senate, and Winsome Earle-Sears got just 2 to 1 killed on money. And how much of that's the campaign versus national apathy? I don't know.
Yeah, no, and it's a great point. And you know what? I always tell this about the Democrats. People like saying, "Oh, the DNC has no money," and blah blah blah. The Democrats always find it for the campaigns. They
Well, because it's
always
not the
find it.
party. They got the
Yep,
outside groups. And so
yep,
that's where the mistake is that we run everything through the party. They got all these lefty Soros backed groups,
yep,
and it's not an equal, it's
yep,
like looking at two different leagues.
yep. And look, to their credit, they figured it out early on. They started spending money in both these races well into the summer because they knew that they had problems. They know the National Democratic brand is in the toilet and whatnot, and they don't take anything for granted. And they literally go out and try to buy these elections. People would say to me over the years, how can the Democrats put people like Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi in charge? I say, because they are unbelievable fundraisers. That's why they're in charge. And that's why the Democrats always get the loyalty that they get out of them, because I'm sure Chuck Schumer behind closed doors, and it's one of the reasons we still have the shutdown going on. He's trying to keep all these other Democrats in line.
All right, let's move to your state. We'll move up a little north here to New Jersey. Jack Ciattarelli lost to the current incumbent governor last time by 3 points. President Trump kept New Jersey within 6 in the presidential race. Explain to me, before we get into the actual poll numbers,
Yeah.
where is New Jersey in the universe? Were those one-offs? Is it trending? Is there something to be seen here in terms of the movement of the state as a whole?
That's a great question. And I think what you're seeing is the voters in New Jersey, they want change. You've got 6 out of 10 of these voters in New Jersey are telling you the state is off on the wrong track, which, by the way, is different than what you're seeing in Virginia. For the most part, voters will tell you in Virginia that they like the direction of the state, which they're dealing with some complacency there. And what you've got is a lot of folks, the number one issue by far in New Jersey is cost and affordability. And that's where the fight's been about. I was talking about before how the Democrats have literally come out early in this race. The first ad that Mikie Sherrill ran out of the box was a flat out lie. She was saying that Jack Ciattarelli wanted to raise the sales tax up to 10 cents, up to 10%, which was totally untrue. He was talking about what they do in a place like Tennessee where they don't have an income tax. I remember when I saw the quote and I'm like, that's not Jack, because Jack is a tax cutter. So look, and what you're seeing is in a place like New Jersey, you look at what just happened in the presidential race where President Trump won Passaic County, New Jersey.
I got that I was going to ask you about that. I got that in my notes.
It's a majority minority county, Hispanic, Black. Donald Trump did really, really well there. Jack has done a really good job campaigning in those areas, and he has a couple dozen like real Democratic endorsements from Democratic mayors in some of these, urban areas, in some of these cities, and he's done a good job of reaching out to these folks. It almost reminds me a little bit of Pennsylvania, not that long ago, which, Pennsylvania, obviously, they've got Pittsburgh, they got Philly, they got their urban core, and you've got you've got your urban pockets in New Jersey, but in a lot of ways, New Jersey is one big suburb. And where, Pennsylvania, remember they used to tell us it was part of the blue wall? Now it's become the ultimate swing state. Now, I'm not saying New Jersey has become Pennsylvania yet, but it's becoming more and more of a swing state. So look at places like Bergen County, New Jersey. Look at places like where Donald Trump actually did better than Jack Ciattarelli did in the last presidential race. And I know the Ciattarelli campaign has really made it a point of emphasis to reach out to those kinds of areas.
So 8:00 polls close Eastern tomorrow in New Jersey. When you say look at Bergen County, if Ciattarelli, what does he need to do well there? Does he need to win it? What does Bergen County need to look like for Jack Ciattarelli?
He probably needs to at least tie in a place like Bergen County, or maybe only lose by a point or two. Because if you look back, basically, both Murphy and Kamala Harris, they got about 52. I think Murphy got like 51% of the vote there. And then you also have to see, okay, how did they turn out? Because what's interesting is what's happened in central New Jersey, which is places like Ocean County and Morris and Monmouth. Those counties there, especially a place like Ocean's become the place where when Bergen County gets too expensive, you go buy a place down in Republican Ocean County where the property taxes are much cheaper. They've got good schools and there's really not any crime down. The Republicans do a really good job down there. It's the place you move before you go to Florida or go to some other low tax state and whatnot. So I think those are the places I'd be looking at, is probably up north, looking at Passaic. I'll look at Bergen and then see, did the Republicans really run up the numbers in Ocean? Because the other piece of this, a lot was made about early voting, and they're saying, well, it looks like the Democrats have about a 250,000 vote advantage. Jack is getting a significant number of Democrats. You know, you saw one survey that came out recently. He was getting a large portion of the black vote in there. Jack needs probably to win about 15% of the Democrats in order to win. He's got to win independents by double digits. That's just the math there. If he can keep that up and he can win, get a significant number of the Democrats, and the other county I'd look at is Gloucester County down in South Jersey. It's not a huge county, but it's the ultimate swing county where it goes about, 48, 49 Democrats and Republican.
Okay. So let's talk about the polling there. Since the middle of October, Trafalgar had Mikie Sherrill, the Democrat, up 1, coefficient. 23rd of October had Sherrill up 1, Quantus Insights, Sherrill up 3, Quinnipiac, Sherrill up 7 on the 23rd. Suffolk has her up +4 on the 26th. The Hill and Emerson on the 25th to the 28th had her up 2. Fox News had Mikie Sherrill up 7 on the 24th. And then Atlas has the race Sherrill up 1 from the 25th to the 30th with 1,639 likely voters. Very small 0.2 margin of error. Where is it? I mean, the one thing that's interesting is the last couple show it tightening, but never does Jack Ciattarelli get in the lead.
Yeah, and look, I think the race is neck and neck here. I really believe that. I think if the Republicans have a good day tomorrow, I think they're going to win this thing, because all the energy I'm seeing on the ground and I'm seeing locally and whatnot, and I get all over the state for various things, whether it's work or other related things. I was down the Jersey Shore last weekend. You don't see a lot of Mikie Sherrill stuff. Like I was in Hoboken, New Jersey, which is a Democratic bastion. It's a place where Donald Trump lost to Kamala Harris 75-25. It's like a microcosm, almost a little bit of New York City in a place like Hoboken. And look, are there more Mikie Sherrill signs there? Yes. But there's a lot of Jack Ciattarelli signs there. And the Ciattarelli campaign has been those. And that's how you win. Instead of only getting 25% of the vote in a place like Hoboken, New Jersey, you get 30, you get 33% of the vote. And I think he's making those kinds of inroads. And I think, look, they've timed it perfectly. They're doing a teletown hall tonight with President Trump. It looks like in places like Ocean and Monmouth, they had really good turnout numbers. And I think literally if Jack Ciattarelli wins election day, he's going to win that election.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm glad you brought that up. 7:00, President Trump doing a town hall for Virginia voters, and then at 7:30, a teletown hall with New Jersey voters. So just a little bit from now. But I do want to pivot now to New York City. Okay, because you talked about don't believe the polling, and I'll do the same thing I did with the other states. Let me just read you, since the 22nd of October, here's what Real Clear Politics has. Yeah. Victory Insights on the 22nd, Mamdani +18, Manhattan Institute +15, Suffolk, Mamdani +10, Quinnipiac, Mamdani +10, Marist, Mamdani +16, Fox News from the 24th to 28th, 971 likely voters. They have Mamdani up 16. The Hill Emerson, check this one out, Jim McLaughlin, 10-5 to 10-28, 640 likely voters. Mamdani up 25, which I think is nuts. Yeah. Atlas Intel 25 to 30, 1,587 likely voters. Mamdani +7. Now, here's my theory on this, and you tell me as a pollster. I have said every morning on the morning meeting, you cannot poll this race legitimately because no one's wearing the right jersey right now. If you are a traditional Democrat, the guy on your line is a communist terrorist sympathizing dude named Zohran Mamdani. If you're a traditional Democrat, the guy you're voting for is a scandal-plagued New York institution dude on an independent line. And then if you're a Republican, like a lot of the guys that I know from high school and college are texting me, dude, I never thought I'd vote for a Democrat, but I am. And like, so you can't. So tell me just first and foremost, do you believe any of the polling?
No. And as your point is, it's all over the place. And look, the other thing I always look at when you're polling in a place like New York City, you need to do bilingual polling. And this race, one of the things I learned in the old days from my old boss, Arthur Finkelstein, politics is very tribal, especially in places like New York City. And I think a lot of these polls, they're not taking into account Hispanic voters. Like I did some polling for Mike Bloomberg back in the day, and our polling was right on the money. And one of the reasons why we were doing Spanish speaking bilingual interviews before it was cool. And I think the other thing look, I think their models are probably not right here. And the reason why I'm going to tell you that is that we've already had 750,000 people that have voted early in New York City. They're projecting a turnout of over 2 million people. The last time we saw a turnout like this in a general election for New York City mayor was when David Dinkins was running against Rudy Giuliani back in the day. So that's the kind of, and I was going to use the word excitement, but it's not really excitement. I think there's a lot of people out there just trying to save New York. Now, if the Atlas Intel poll is right, it's only 7. And you look at a lot of these early voters were boomers and older folks and whatnot. That's in Andrew Cuomo's wheelhouse. And the problem with our friend Curtis Sliwa is when I was looking at one of the polls not too long ago, he was getting less than 60% of the Republican vote, and he was only getting about half the Trump vote. What he needed to do was Donald Trump got about a third of the vote in New York City last time. And one of his best districts, believe it or not, was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's district. If you remember after the election, she said she wanted to know why he had such a big improvement. She was going to listen to people as to why he did so well in her majority Hispanic district. So I think, look, I think you're right. I think it could be interesting, and I think it's going to be closer than people think in New York tomorrow.
I agree. That's what I keep saying. The turnout, because to your point, if you model off 750,000, which is roughly what it was 4 years ago, and you have double that, a lot of young people and it's both ends. It's younger and older.
And then your point too, and there's a lot of people saying that, in Manhattan, the early vote was really high, and it was lower in places like the Bronx. Early voting probably helps, in a place like Manhattan, probably helps Mamdani. In a place like the Bronx, I would say it's probably more helpful to Cuomo.
All right, let's just assume, and I just want to that the Democrats have a good night tomorrow night, that they end up winning. I still, like I said, my Virginia belief is that we could get all 3 pulled over the top, but it also depends on the ground game right now, because it's that close that I think in both states that the ground game's worth 3 points, and so we'll see who does it better. Yeah. Let's just, for the sake of argument, assume that Democrats have a good night. What is the takeaway looking forward to the midterms? Do you think that anyone should look in the crystal ball and say this means X or Y, or is that just, hey, they had a good night?
And look, they're supposed to win New Jersey. They're supposed to win Virginia, and they're supposed to win the New York City mayor's race. And I think the big takeaway is probably going to be Zohran Mamdani, because as well as he's done in New York City, and another point I want to make, while I despise his politics, I think the guy is going to destroy New York City if, God forbid, he gets elected the mayor of New York City. The guy has run a good campaign. He's run a good grassroots campaign. He's been on message the whole time. He understood the whole idea about affordability and whatnot. But what I'm also seeing is in places like out in Long Island, in Nassau County, he's got a 69% unfavorable rating. In the Hudson Valley, his negatives are in the mid 60s. So people are looking at this. And by the way, I think that our friend Jack Ciattarelli is actually going to get some help, especially in northern, in places like Bergen County and Passaic, that they're going to want to check and balance on a guy like Mamdani because they're so affected by what happens in New York City. But I think that's going to be the real story here is, you've got people like Barack Obama trying to play both sides with the Marxist socialists. And then you've got others like, somebody like Josh Gottheimer, and you've got John Fetterman saying, hey, we got to get away from this whole socialist Marxist thing. You know what the irony is too about John Fetterman? John Fetterman beat Connor Lamb because John Fetterman was looked at as the liberal. He was the liberal. He was the progressive in the race. And now he's become like a voice of reason in the Democratic Party. It just goes to show you how far radical lunatic left, as President Trump likes to say, the Democrats have gone.
It really is insane that there's a guy that probably will get elected mayor that's a communist, sympathizing terrorist hanging around with kind of guy. And yet I'm blown away that's, and to your point that you've got Obama and all these guys going in, supporting him. Anyway, the last thing I want to ask you is this, Jim. I keep seeing these national polls about redistricting and what parties being right now, and Democrats look like in all these latest public polls. ABC News, there's a News Nation poll out, shows that it's a tie. ABC News, Dems +2, Dems +2. But here's my question for you. Does it really matter if you're doing a national poll about what party's up and down? Yeah. And at the end of the day, after redistricting is all done, there's only about 20 seats in play. Is that a fair way to look at the midterms?
I'll be the first one to tell people. I say the generic ballot at the national level is really overrated when it's all said and done, especially now more so than ever, just simply because, as your point, I was just looking at inside elections. They only have like 13 pure toss-up races. Now, some of this stuff is going to change with what happens in California and Texas and all this other kind of stuff that's going on with redistricting and whatnot. But I think it is a little bit overrated. And look, Sean, there's going to be a lot. It's going to be an eternity for the next year. So much is going to happen. And I think one of the best things that the Republicans have going for them, Donald Trump was left a mess. He was left a foreign policy mess. There were wars all over the world going on. We all know what was going on in the Middle East. The economy was a disaster. And I think, quite honestly, his economic policies are the best thing that we have going for us. Tax cuts, energy deregulation, energy independence, things like our fair trade, all this capital that he's bringing into the country, Sean. I think what we're going to see, and we saw this before COVID. He had his best numbers ever. Best numbers on the economy, best numbers in terms of his job approval right before COVID. And it was right after they overreached on impeachment. So I think a lot is going to happen. I think the most important thing is that the Republicans need to keep their eye on the ball, and we need to keep talking about our successes and keep talking about how crazy the Democrats have become. And look, the Democrats used to always yell and scream about the Republicans being the party of obstruction. The Democrats are the ones that have given us this historic shutdown.
Totally agree. Jim McLaughlin, always love our conversations. Thanks for being here, and let's cross our fingers for tomorrow night.
Amen.
Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you tune in tomorrow. House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan. Friday, Victor Davis Hanson. We got a great lineup all week long. Thanks for being here. And tomorrow night, we're live at 8. See you back here tomorrow on the Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.